Hello, Master. My question is, how can one completely eliminate or at least significantly reduce self-attachment? Even though I know it's just a wound, it still hurts. My second question is one my friend asked me to bring up. When afflictive emotions arise, even though you know they are afflictions, you still can't detach yourself from them. Sometimes you even get more and more entangled, actually turning it into an even bigger problem. Thank you.
First of all, eliminating self-attachment is not that easy, but it is absolutely necessary to get rid of self-attachment. Right now, for everyone present, if you haven't used wisdom to examine it, the so-called self seems to clearly exist. But when we actually try to observe the self, we originally tend to think that it is our body, but where exactly is the self? Is the self perhaps hidden inside the head, in the heart, or maybe somewhere else entirely? When you carefully investigate, you can never actually find the true master of the self. This isn't just what Buddhism states, even modern medicine says the same thing. Therefore, modern Buddhism provides a detailed analysis of the so-called self. This is called the aggregation of the 5 skandhas: form, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. For example, when our consciousness and our body come together and interact with each other, we call this combination the self. It's like when we say this is a bottle, but if we really try to find it, where exactly is the so-called bottle? Is it at the bottom, the mouth, inside, or outside the bottle? At this point, we realize that what we call a bottle is just a temporary combination. In this regard, I believe Buddhism is truly exceptional. Whether it's a university professor or a scientist, I've met many scientists who believe that the self exists. And when they say the self exists, I ask them, where exactly are you? They say it's my body, but actually the body is my body, not me. So where exactly are you right now? At this point, some say I am in the heart, while others say I am in the mind. Since you claim to exist, in what exact form do you exist? Do you exist as consciousness, or as a physical body, or at the molecular level? At this point, no one really has a clear idea. Therefore, Buddhism speaks of no self. Breaking down no self, we have no self of persons and no self of phenomena. The latter means things like my house, my car, my flowers, and so on. All these so-called possessions of mine are referred to as the self of phenomena. And as for the so-called self, this refers to our attachment to ourselves. In fact, when it comes to the so-called self, we haven't really examined it. If you truly investigate where exactly is this self, when you look for it, you still can't find the self. Therefore, Buddhism speaks of no self. Of course, this understanding of no self begins with recognition, and after recognizing it, you gradually practice. Through practice, you slowly and gradually eliminate attachment to self. Eliminating attachment to self is a long process. It's not something you can decide to let go of. Suddenly the self disappears. You might understand the non-existence of the self on a theoretical level, but in terms of actual realization, it still takes some time. After gradually practicing, eventually, there is no selfishness left. It's a state of complete realization. In Buddhism, this is considered a very profound and significant state. Now, the second question is about so-called afflictions. Does the process of working to overcome them actually create more afflictions? Actually, that's not the case either. Unless your method for dealing with afflictions is wrong, if your method is wrong, you might end up with even more afflictions. But if your method is correct, we first need to truly recognize our own afflictions. In fact, recognizing afflictions is the same as recognizing self-attachment. There are 6 primary afflictions and 20 subsidiary afflictions. The 6 primary afflictions are greed, anger, ignorance, arrogance, and so on. So each of these afflictions is a form of attachment. For example, when I feel anger, when I experience anger towards someone, if at that moment I use my own wisdom to observe where this anger arises in my mind, is this mind of mine outside or inside? Mother Teresa once said, if I love my enemy, eventually the enemy will become my friend. So this kind of love, really. In fact, for someone with a certain level of realization, anger can immediately turn into love. But for us, it seems that we can never truly feel love for our enemies. Instead, we harbor a kind of hatred toward them. You also need to use your own wisdom to observe the difference between this hatred and love. It turns out it's just a matter of discrimination. When people argue with each other, at that very moment, observe where exactly your affliction is. At this time, you will gradually discover that if your method is truly correct, it will not in any way instead become a cause of pain, suffering, or affliction.
Homage to the Dharma Master. I would like to ask a question. My first question is, just now the Dharma Master mentioned that the wisdom of benefiting others is extremely important. We are wondering, how can we truly realize the view that there is no difference between self and others? I have this kind of idea. One is all, and all is one. How can each person realize that we and others and this world are actually one and the same?
Truly understanding that self and others are not separate. This is actually relatively easy, and there are two ways to approach it. In Buddhism, we talk about apparent reality and ultimate reality. On the level of apparent reality, it is impossible for self and others to be truly undivided. Everyone has their own position and their own values, and others have theirs. But at this time, we should value others more than ourselves, or prioritize benefiting others. Do not do to others what you do not wish for yourself. This is very important. That is, their position is important, as emphasized in Buddhism. One should use wisdom to benefit all beings. This is mentioned in the Buddhist scripture, the Sutra of Mindfulness of the True Dharma, which teaches us to use wisdom to benefit sentient beings. Within the apparent reality where self and others exist, we should often maintain a mindset of wanting to help others. If you take this very seriously, at first, others may not understand or may not be aware of it. But gradually, over time, this kind of thinking and attitude you have will be praised by society and gain public recognition. In the end, you will also become successful. Although your altruistic efforts may not be noticed right away, you will definitely have a promising future. From the perspective of ultimate reality, self and others are not separate. The self is others and others are the self. This is the concept from the Avatamsaka Sutra. One is many and many are one. This relates to the Buddhist teaching of emptiness. This profound Buddhist concept of emptiness is actually considered a rather advanced spiritual state. At this particular point, the so-called fundamental distinction between self and others no longer truly exists.
What is the ultimate? That's all.
There are many ways to understand what is called ultimate. From the perspective of Buddhist wisdom, the true ultimate is that all phenomena are empty. The principle, all phenomena are empty. In fact, even modern physics, including quantum mechanics, has to acknowledge this. Moreover, what they have discovered happens to coincide with what Buddhism taught over 2,500 years ago. The true nature of all phenomena, as discerned by the Buddha's omniscient wisdom and wisdom of suchness, matches perfectly without the slightest discrepancy. So this is also a truly astonishing discovery. Now, scientists believe that Eastern thought was remarkably advanced and are very surprised by this. So I think everyone has different ways of judging the ultimate nature of any phenomenon. Of course, if what you're asking is related to this aspect, I think it's best to understand that the essence of all phenomena is emptiness. But its intrinsic nature is also inherently luminous and radiant. In Buddhism, this is called the inseparability of appearance and emptiness. In the world today, this is also referred to as the fundamental basis of all phenomena, of everything in existence.